I am so glad you were able to come out today. We have temperatures out there that we just talked about -1 degree. And you are out, you came from the warmer country, 8 degrees. Wow, it's so warm there. It's supposed to get up all the way to 16 today, but it's not snowing, that's good. And so my congratulations to you in your strength being there. We have as a guest today Jim Bullard, who's the chairman of the Second Chance Heart Transplant Support Group. And I meant to give him a heads up that I was going to introduce him and have him say, welcome to you. He is treated over to Hahnemann with Dr. Eisen over there. But Jim, without any lights on you, sorry about that, why don't you say hello to our group? How many years you out now, Jim?
I've got 9 years.
And you're just laying around in bed, right?
No, I have nothing to do. I'm a retiree, and believe it or not, I hang out with Jim every so often. But thank you very much for the invite. I really appreciate that. But I just want to say that with those of us who are heart transplant recipients, although we are different people, but let me tell you, we are family. Because, as you all know, that we know, for an example, when you take those steroids, call them anything you want, they're playing those steroids, you know, we mentally, physically, and everything else go all over the place. But the key thing is that we know, for an example, Jim and I are interfacing with about 803 people over time and so forth, and we share how we're feeling. Because those of us who are newbies, those of you who are newbies coming through, you think, oh man, I'm the only one who's been there and done that. You know, we can share. We get telephone calls daily. That's about this, that, and the other. So that being said, thank you very much for the invite, and thank you for welcoming me.
Well, with that, let me also introduce Lois, if I can find her here. A lot of Jim's success is because of his lovely wife, Lois. And Jim was kind in not sharing all the stuff he does. He's behind the camera today. He's a professional TV show producer up in Piscataway for the community TV up there. And because he didn't have enough to do between all the other things he does, he got into politics a couple years ago. So every time you turn around, he's campaigning for something coming up. And if you need any of those nail boards, ladies, he's got so many with his names from the last campaign available. Just ask him. I want to introduce Kathie King, who, how many of you know Kathie already? All people are saying hello to her. I didn't get her services. Kathie, you weren't here 21 years ago, were you?
I was not, no.
I wish you had been. Maybe I wouldn't look like I did today if you were. Anyway, we are truly blessed to have Kathie here today, as those of you who know her well. Sharing, it's not a sexy topic. And that's probably why we didn't get the usual 80 people signing up, and not just because of the weather, but because, you know, we just assume that what we're doing is okay, and life can be so much better when you can live it healthy, and nutrition is what drives that. So, Kathie, you've got a most important topic, and I'm very pleased that you're allowing us to share with our national audience as well as the audience here. And so with that, let me switch over to your slides. There's our background. And so you've been with us since 2010. Kathie, you're up.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so happy to see you all here. I know it's really cold out, so I hope that you like the presentation I put together for you guys. My name is Kathie King. I'm the dietitian here at the Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania. And as my little bio said, I've been working with the heart failure transplant VAD group since about 2011. I was not interested in cardiac nutrition initially, but an opportunity came up to work with the transplant team, so I thought, why not? And now I feel very fortunate to be working with this group and with you all. It's really a great program, and I'm very happy and passionate about cardiac nutrition now. As those of you who had to sit with me before your transplant might know, sometimes I'm stomping my feet and getting all angry at something, but hopefully together we can get the tools that you all need to eat better, and that's really my goal for everybody. So I told her I was going to talk about her. I met with a patient last week, Francis, and Sally asked me probably 3 or 4 months ago if I would do a talk, and I said, oh, sure, and then I didn't think about it for 2 or 3 months. And then a couple weeks ago, she said, your talk is scheduled for February, and I thought, oh, I guess I need to figure out what I'm going to talk about. And I really had no idea what to talk about because I live and breathe nutrition every day. I could talk about almost anything for 8 hours. So to kind of narrow it down for you folks, I wasn't really sure what to do. And a lot of times I think we as clinicians have a completely different idea about what you need or what you want. And unless we're asking you, oftentimes we're just talking and talking about things that you either don't care about, aren't interested in, don't understand, or is not helpful. So I had an epiphany after meeting with Frances last week because she's very put together, savvy, smart woman sitting there, and she said, I'm not sure what to eat. And that really struck me because to me it's so obvious what you should eat. And yet here's this woman who really just was confused about what should I'm not sure what to do. And so I started to think about why that is, and that's what I want to talk about today. Let's see if I can do this right. What should I eat? So here are the topics that I would like to cover. I want to cover the basics of what good food is. I also want to talk about food marketing, which I think is what is adding to most people's confusion about what to eat. And then I want to give you a couple tools so you feel confident going forward in choosing your own food. And food, like Jim said, everybody has, I think maybe it was you, Jim, everybody has their own set of what is good for me, what is my life like. I want you to feel comfortable in your life picking foods that are good for you. I don't want to hand you a list and say these are the only good foods for you to eat because you're not going to enjoy yourself that way. So I want you all to feel like you can live your life and pick good foods. So that's my goal here today. And then afterwards, I'm happy to answer anyone's questions if you want me to get into something more specifically. And Jim's going to let me know if I talk too long because I do that sometimes. So most of these slides I just ripped right off the American Heart Association website, so I should probably put that disclaimer out there since it's going to go out to people. To me, this is the basic. This is what you should eat. I tell everybody all the time, fruits and vegetables and whole grains, but mostly fruits and vegetables, the more people eat fruits and vegetables, the less likely they are to suffer from a whole slew of diseases. And there's just study after study after study that talks about people who eat more fruits and vegetables have less diabetes. People who eat more fruits and vegetables have less everything. So you have to eat them. Then we'll talk a little bit about carbohydrates, good fats, and proteins. And then you want to limit bad fats, mostly. The cholesterol recommendation, I think, is going away as of maybe this week. There are new dietary guidelines coming out. I believe that they're available for comment right now, and I'm pretty sure the cholesterol restriction is going away because cholesterol doesn't act the same when you eat it as when it's in your body. So that might change the way you feel about eggs in the future, but we'll just go with what we have now. So let's talk about our plant foods first. In anything, whole foods are the best. So when you walk the outline of the supermarket where the foods are more or less in their natural state and they haven't been manipulated by anyone, those are the best foods. those are the foods that nature gave us. They have everything that we should need to be healthy and nourished. So a plant-based diet, and I believe this is also one of the more recent recommendations in the guidelines, focus on a plant-based diet. Lean proteins. So why is that the best way to eat? The fruits and vegetables have nutrients that we almost can't even name. They have so many. They have vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, just all kinds of things that work in your body that every time someone tries to manufacture them or pull them out and put them in a pill, they don't work the same way. So there's a lot of synchronicity in the food that you eat, and the less someone manipulated the food, the more that seems to work. The more you try to extract it out and put it in a pill, the less it seems to work. So plant-based diet, lots of fruits and vegetables. I did want to make a note, fruits and vegetables contain a lot of potassium. So this can become an issue for people, especially after transplant, if you are taking certain immunosuppressants, which increase your potassium. So if that is an issue, we can give you lists of fruits and vegetables that have less potassium. But that is one note I want to make specifically for transplant is if you have high potassium or are at risk for high potassium, you need to be careful about which fruits and vegetables. But that's something that I could help you with, and another dietitian could help you with. It shouldn't keep you from eating fruits and vegetables. The same thing with Coumadin and aldactone. If people are on a diuretic that increases their potassium, we can work around that. And also with the Coumadin, there's a list of foods that aren't great for you or that you shouldn't have because it will counteract the Coumadin's work, but that doesn't mean that you give up fruits and vegetables. So if you have any of those things that you need to worry about, that's where someone like me comes in because I can help you choose around those, okay? Grains. Whole grains are the best. Why? Because, again, they have all the nutrients in their natural form to work best in your body. When you take those grains and pulverize them and take the fiber out and make them easier to digest, they lose a lot of their nutrients, and they also can impact your blood sugar much more quickly than a whole grain. So for people who have issues with blood sugar and diabetes, again, we can talk about this specifically if you like. A carb raises your blood sugar no matter what kind of carb it is, but how quickly and how much it raises your blood sugar can really be impacted by the kind of carb you choose. So anytime you can choose whole grains, that's much better than something that's enriched, where again, they stripped out all the good stuff and then put it back in a chemical form. So anytime you can get your food unprocessed, that's better. A lot of people ask me about celiac, or not celiac, they ask me about gluten-free. Gluten-free products are available for people who specifically have celiac disease. If you have celiac disease, that is an actual allergy to gluten, which is a kind of protein in wheat and other grains. You have to avoid it at that point. If you do not have celiac disease, there's no real reason for you to avoid gluten unless you personally have some GI intolerance to it. Other than that, gluten is just a protein in wheat. It's nothing to be afraid of. If you don't need to avoid it because of celiac disease and you buy these gluten-free products, again, you're looking at a manipulation of the grain where they're taking stuff out and putting other stuff in. So it doesn't make it more healthy for you. I feel like it actually makes it less desirable for you. That's one of those things that we dietitians call a fad. that everyone seems to think that they need gluten-free products. You do not need gluten-free products unless you have celiac disease, and you would know if you had celiac disease. So unless you have an intolerance, a GI intolerance, whole grains, including wheat, including gluten, are fine. Healthy fats. This gets confusing for a lot of people because we talk about polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, omega-3s, omega-6s. What does that all mean? Again, if we look to the plant world and look at the fats that are in the plant world, like avocados, those are good fats. Olives, those are good fats. When we look more to the animal world, that's where we run into trouble with bad fats or saturated fats. I almost put in a slide of lipid molecules to show you the difference between a saturated fat and an unsaturated fat, but I thought that might be going a little overboard, although I really do enjoy showing those slides so I can show people how the molecules bend. But basically, a saturated fat, and that's mostly coming from animals, is a fat that at room temperature will be solid. So think about that, because you are what you eat, and that fat gets into many of your cells. It's like the insulation around cells in your body. It's a layer around the cell. So if it's solid and stiff, that's what your cells are going to do. When you take a fat and it's liquid at room temperature, like oils, like olive oil, that goes into your cells, and that's what your cells are going to do. So that's why we don't want saturated fats and we want unsaturated fats, because it keeps your cells loose, keeps your vessels loose, your blood vessels are nice and loose, things can move around like they're supposed to. If they're all stiff, it's like my grandmother used to say, hardening of the arteries, things go bad. So saturated fats, bad. Unsaturated fats, whether it's polyunsaturated, which just means there's a bunch of molecules that are not saturated with an extra hydrogen, or monounsaturated, which means just one. But either way, it allows the molecules to bend and it keeps things loose. And that's probably too confusing when you're at the shopping market, but these are good fats. So they come from plants, olive oil, nuts, flax, chia. Good fats do also come from cold water fish, not all fish, but cold water fish. We could talk a little bit about flax and chia a little bit later, but they're good fats. And I did include this handout, once again from the American Heart Association, that makes it pretty easy to see what a good fat is and what a bad fat is. It lists some of the food sources for those fats, but again, the more processed a food is, the more likely it is to have something bad in it, like bad fats and trans fats, which is where they take what was once a good fat, shoot hydrogens at it to saturate it, and it makes it stiff. So you don't want those fats in your body. Then we get to protein, which, if you know any dietitians at HUP, this is our favorite topic because we all love protein and we give everyone a lot of protein. Again, proteins come from animals and from plants. The difference is, and I know the few of you who have sat with me recently pre-transplant, I talked about proteins like the alphabet. Proteins are made up of amino acids. You need all amino acids to make any protein in your body. So certain foods have what's called a complete protein. They have all the letters that your body needs to make any protein at once, whether it's a blood cell, whether it's a muscle cell, whether it's a piece of skin. It needs the whole alphabet to make that protein. Animal products have all amino acids. It's a complete protein, so it will have the essential amino acids that you need for nutrition. Plant foods generally do not have all amino acids. So they have what's called incomplete proteins, except for, there's one exception, which is soy, which does have a complete protein. So if you're eating a more plant-based diet, in order to get all your amino acids and get a complete protein, you need to eat complementary foods. And in almost every culture in the world, there's some dish that's made with rice and beans. Now, I don't know how they knew it or who discovered it or how they knew to put them together, but rice has the first half of the alphabet and beans has the second half of the alphabet. So when you put them together, you get a complete protein. So that's actually like a meat substitute, rice and beans. You don't need to be thinking about all this when you're buying your food, but I just wanted you to have the background to know where proteins come from. How much protein do you need? Again, if you ask a dietitian at Huff, we'll probably say a lot more than this, but for basic health, most people need about a gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. That varies greatly depending on your individual situation. So if you are sick in the hospital and you just had surgery, you're going to need more than that. But if you're out living your life, eating, feeling well, about a gram per kilo is probably where you need to be. And in case you don't know how to get to kilograms, take your weight, divide by 2.2, and that gives you your weight in kilograms. So if you weighed 64 kilograms, you would need about 64 grams of protein. This isn't something that you need to track diligently. You need to get about that every day. It's not, because most people don't keep track of what they're eating, and we all seem to be doing fine. We all seem to get enough protein. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're actually trying to put some sort of diet together. And something to be aware of, I think, when you're looking at what you're eating, how much protein am I taking in. For vegetarians, you need to be much more conscious of where you're getting your protein from. But if you eat a serving or two of meat a day, you're pretty much covered for your protein, because all the other foods will have just enough to make up the difference. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So here are animal sources of protein. The egg is considered the gold standard of protein absorption. Your body absorbs every bit of that protein, which is why those of you who see me pre-transplant and are having trouble getting protein in, I'm always pushing eggs because I know that you're going to absorb that. Then there are plant sources of protein. Again, soy proteins are a complete protein, so it will have all the amino acids you need. And soy comes in many, many forms, like tofu, the edamame. They even have like snack foods made of soy now. But you'll need to watch your sodium content with some of the soy products if you're getting them prepared as tofu or something like that. They can contain a lot of soy. I'm sorry, a lot of sodium. Okay. Bone disease I wanted to bring up specifically for post-transplant patients because, as Jim was talking about steroids leach your bones. A lot of people are on steroids after transplant and some for extended periods of time. So you need to be aware that that can affect your bone density, and you want to kind of counteract that by making sure you're getting enough calcium. Calcium in your diet is sometimes difficult to absorb. I have listed on the next slide some sources of calcium in food. It's not always as bioavailable as it is in something that's a dairy product. And the reason for that is often because the dairy has the vitamin D with the calcium, and they help each other be absorbed in your body. When you're trying to get your calcium out of broccoli, you may get a lot less of it than is listed here. So just be aware of how much calcium is in your body if you're on, in your diet if you're on steroids. And you may need to take a supplement of calcium, and that's something that you can discuss specifically with either me or your physician. But you do want to be aware of the effect steroids have on your bones. And here are some foods that have calcium in them. Okay. Someone asked me about this before we started today. Weight gain after transplant. I've seen a lot of people gain weight after transplant, and I think the main reason is because they feel good. Before transplant, you don't feel good, your appetite is gone, and in a lot of cases, you have an altered metabolism that is either leaning towards or on the way to cachexia. Your metabolism speeds up and it starts taking away your weight. After transplant, your metabolism returns more to what is normal for you. So if before you had heart failure, you were a certain weight, you're likely to go back close to that weight because that's where you were. For some people, it's a good thing to gain weight because they were so thin before transplant, and they fill out and they look nice and healthy. But if you feel like you're gaining too much weight, or if you do top over into the obese category, you are again at risk for future heart disease, diabetes, problems with your joints, all the things that the rest of us are susceptible to. So, how do you lose weight after transplant? You want to lose weight slowly in a controlled manner. By doing that, you are going to preserve your muscle mass and make sure that you're adequately nourished. You do not want to go on a fad diet, eat only cabbage soup, or any of those things that are out there, because what you'll lose is muscle mass and all the nutrients you need to be healthy. So dietitians, and I agree with this, love things like Weight Watchers. I love Weight Watchers. I think it's the best thing ever for losing weight. I know people who have lost weight on it. I've seen them keep it off for years, because what it does is it forces you to be aware of your food. I think for most people, especially in this country, we just shovel it in. We have no idea how much we're eating, sometimes what we're eating. You'll go to a party. I do this myself. You go to a party and you just try everything, and then you go back and try it again. And especially after the Super Bowl, there was a lot of articles out that talked about how you could consume like 3,000 or 4,000 calories at a Super Bowl party. And if someone asked you what you ate, you'd be like, oh, I just had a few chips and maybe a wing or two. Because in your mind, because you didn't sit down to some elaborate meal maybe, it's not that many calories. So with something like Weight Watchers, you really have to account for every morsel of food you put into your mouth. And it makes you think about it. So if you only have so many points a day, you're going to think, do I want this mini brownie that's like 15 points, or could I have 3 meals for 15 points and not feel hungry? You can't lose weight without giving up some calories. I mean, there's just no other way around it. There's no magic cure. There's no magic bullet. It's calories in, calories out. How you choose to shave those calories off is a whole different story. And that's why it's like $1 billion industry in this country, because there are many ways to do it. But the question is, after having gone through a transplant, what is healthy for you? And it's not a pill, and it's not one of those fad diets. You need to just be thoughtful about your food, because you want to nourish your body. And then you shave some calories off for weight loss. And again, we can talk a lot more about that individually, but my recommendation will always be something like Weight Watchers, where you learn about portion control and your behavior when you eat. Many, many people need someone to help them do it. So some people like to go to meetings, but you can also do things on your phone. There's a million apps out there that will help you track your calories and give you suggestions on substitutes for certain foods. There's Weight Watchers online, MyFitnessPal, Fujicate, which I'm going to talk about later because it's the best app ever. And a lot of people are using Fitbit now. But there's a variety of ways to do it in a healthy manner. And as some of you may know from working with me, sometimes I'll just make someone count their carbs to lose weight, and they will lose weight. And it's no magic involved. It's just about knowing your portion sizes and knowing how much you're taking in at any one time. If you need structure around that, again, there's Weight Watchers, there's me, and there's these apps. So if anyone needs help with that, let me know, and we can talk about that. And these are the things that we do not recommend, as we've already talked about. Anything that's gimmicky or sounds nutty or involves only one food group or makes you roll your eyes, don't do it. You don't need me to tell you that. If you only eat cabbage soup for a week, that's not good for you. And you will lose the wrong kind of weight. As far as supplements go, over-the-counter supplements are not a good idea for anybody, but especially for people who are taking so many different medications that can have so many different side effects. Do not do it. Please, do not take these things. They may seem fine now, and then 10 years later, they're taking fen-phen off the market because it causes heart disease. They're not regulated in the same way that prescription medications are, so we don't always know what effects they'll have later, and we don't always know what is in them. So the manufacturing is not regulated in the same way either. If you want to do something with your physician, that's different. You could talk to your physician because they will speak either to our transplant physician or our transplant pharmacist and make sure that the medications aren't going to harm you. Oh, already said all that. Okay. So this is the part that I was thinking about after meeting with my patient last week, is how many food claims are out there that people believe. And for me, it's hard to believe that people believe them, but then I realized that that's all I do all day, that's all we talk about all day, and this is what made me think this would be a good thing to talk about, because I have people come up to me all the time and ask me about foods, like, is this food good, is that food good, what does this mean, why do I need that? So I just wanted to show you some examples of what the food labels look like. And I say this all the time to my patients. On the front is the marketing. They'll say anything to get you to buy it. You have to look at the back. And we'll talk about looking at food labels later. So here are some examples of current things that we see on labels. No added sugar. It's juice. It's 100% sugar. So the fact that they didn't add sugar is better, but it's still sugar. It's all sugar. So they're making it seem like it's so healthy because we didn't add sugar, but it's still sugar. This is my favorite one. It's my absolute favorite one. No trans fats in the Krispy Kremes. But that does not make it healthy. So just think about, what are they saying to you? Just because it doesn't have something, if it starts out as not a health food, it's not going to be a health food either because I put something in it or I didn't put something in it. So just keep that in mind. whole grains, multi-grain, fiber added. This is very prominent now. A lot of things will say contains whole grain, made with whole grain. If it doesn't say 100% whole grain, it's not whole grain. And in fact, when you look at the ingredients on these, you have to go pretty far down the list to see where the whole grain comes in. If you want the benefits of whole grain, it has to say 100% whole grain, or the ingredient has to say whole grain something. Otherwise, it's not whole grain. I don't care how many grains are in it. If they're not whole, you're not getting the benefits. So it could be like 50 grain bread. It's really just brown bread that is the same as white bread. So always look at the back where the facts and the ingredients are. I also love these because they're all natural and organic, but it's still potato chips and ice cream. So don't forget that. I also love these. Antioxidant 7-Up. It's still soda. It might have a little vitamin C in it, but that does not make it a health food. Green tea is a huge thing. People ask me more about green tea than anything else. It's tea. Tea contains antioxidants. I think they're called flavonoids. I'm almost sure it's flavonoids. They are beneficial in your body, but they do not cure things. They do not stop things. You can also get them from fruit and vegetables. So just drinking green tea or any other beverage does not cure what ails you. It's just, it may be slightly beneficial to you or not, but it's not a health food. These are not health foods. Okay, so now for the tools. I have 2 tools that I'm going to talk about today. The first one is the American Heart Association's Heart Check. This is a really good website. There are tons and tons of articles on here that explain things about everything we just talked about. But the one thing I want to talk about is the heart check. So you see the checked heart up there? That is the American Heart Association saying this food is good for you. So if you are in the supermarket and there's a food that has a heart check on it and one that doesn't, it's a shortcut to knowing that food has less sodium, less fat, less saturated fat, less trans fat, or more of the things that are good for you than the other brand. So that's a shortcut. That's a way where, you know, when we say the basics, eat more fruits and vegetables, eat more whole foods, you're sitting there saying, but I have a lot of things to do, I don't have time to cook all the time, I need some things that are convenient, or I need to be able to go out sometimes. This is a tool that can help you make a choice when you do those things, when you buy something off the shelf. They have a list of all the products that have the heart check on the website, and they have, I gave that as a handout, they have the criteria that they use, which I think is really important because even if something doesn't have the heart check, you know how they decided to give something a heart check, and it might help you make a decision on another food. So if we just look at sodium, for example, there's different categories up to 140 grams, 240, 360, or 480 milligrams fall into different categories. So if you're looking at something and you see the sodium content is below 240, that might be a better choice for you than something else, or it's okay for you to have it. I know a lot of people feel like they can't have things because they're worried about going over their sodium limit or something like that. But if you have an idea of what's okay, just because something has some sodium doesn't mean you can't have it. it's the amount over the course of the day and the amount at one time. So you'll see somewhere in here they talk about you want somewhere around 600 milligrams of sodium per meal or less per meal. So that gives you a benchmark of possibilities. You can say, well, I can have this and this, that still adds up to less than 600, so I'm good. And not try and feel like you can't have anything that has sodium in it. Because I know people have come in and said, well, it has sodium, I can't have that. It's how much sodium. It's not all sodium. So the criteria, which is on this sheet, will really help you to be able to make some decisions. And there's an article on there, the website, that talks about looking at 11,000 people, and those 11,000 people who consumed the heart-check foods had less risk of heart disease and stroke, lower BMI, lower waist circumference, lower blood pressure, and lower cholesterol. So maybe just by incorporating some of those foods into your diet, you may reap some of those benefits. That's just to show you how it's changed over the years. I would say in the last, maybe 5 years, I think the American Heart Association website has just drastically improved. It's much more user-friendly now. There's all kinds of lists, and a lot of the handouts that I gave you today are from there. So it's easy. It's information in an easy chart or an easy way to look at it. And that's the chart for the criteria for the heart check foods. Again, you have to read labels. You cannot go blindly through the world just eating anything because someone says it's good for you or someone says it's healthy. You need to know what is in that food. You need to know how much sodium is in there. You need to know how many carbohydrates are in there. You have to keep track of that for you to keep yourself healthy. They also have some criteria for eating out, which I think is great because eating out is a real minefield for people trying to watch their sodium. So they give you some criteria to go by. If you don't fall exactly in there, if you go somewhere and you're a little over, that's probably better than going somewhere and being a lot over. So at least it gives you an idea of where you should be, and you can look around and try and fit within that. Go on their website, look at their menu. You have to really hunt down the nutrition facts for a lot of these restaurants because they don't want you to see them. So you have to click 5 different times to get to the nutrition facts, but they have them. And there's apps out there. I know I talked to many of you about the apps on your phone. You can find out almost anything. And even if it's not the specific restaurant you're at, you can always Google shrimp scampi, how much sodium, and you get an idea. So just always know what you're doing. Apparently Subway, Eat Fresh, is a healthy place to eat, or a healthier place to eat. So this is just pulled off the website where they list some of the places, some of the restaurants or food establishments you can go to and get something that's healthy. They have salads and sandwiches. This is just an example. I'm not telling you to go to Subway, but this is the app. This is the best thing ever. I cannot believe how much I love this app. It's called Fujiki, and this is why I love it. You can put it on your Apple or Android products. You can look up foods either by category, or you can take a picture of the barcode with your phone and it will bring up the information for you. So if you're out shopping, you just aim your phone at the barcode, it will scan into the database and find the information that you need, and it rates the food for you. So this is almost better than the heart check because this will tell you about any food. So when you're shopping it grades them from A to F, and the best thing is it tells you why. Why is this a good food? Why is this a bad food? You can see the difference between a good food and a bad food. It gives you some idea of what makes this bad. And then it will offer alternatives to you to the bad food. Maybe the same kind of food. Maybe you really want some potato chips. These potato chips are much worse than these. Maybe try these. It will tell you that. It also will give you reliable nutrition information. I think one of the biggest problems with nutrition is that the media and the magazines and the newscasters, they all pull these little sound bites from a study, and it's just completely misrepresented, either because they don't understand the significance of the study or the study design, all those things that we talk about endlessly here. They'll just take a headline and present it to you as if it's fact. Nutrition and medicine in general is very complicated. Everybody's different. All of your metabolisms are different. Things act differently in your body than my body. But what we look for in studies is what happens to the vast majority of people. So there's always individual differences into how you lose weight or you gain weight or how much calcium you need. But for 90% of the people or 85% of the people, they might need this. So you have to be thoughtful when people are giving you information. You have to be thoughtful about where is this information coming from. I learned that in college. Always question the source. I was an English major, by the way. I learned that in college. Oh, where is this information coming from? Who is giving me this information? Do they have anything to gain by giving me this information? This website, the American Heart Association, they are reliable. They're not trying to sell you anything. They will give you a more reliable source of information than Women's Day magazine or even Health magazine or any of those things. And then there's always your friendly neighborhood dietitian, who is the most reliable of all. But this app does it all. So if you have an opportunity to use it, I would really recommend that you get this. It will help you make day-to-day decisions on your food when you're confused. And then you won't need me anymore. So what should you eat? Stick to the basics. Whole food is better than processed food. More plant foods. You need some protein. It's better if it's low-fat dairy and lean proteins. Avoid saturated fats. You all have common sense. You've all been out living in the world. You know that potato chips are healthy. You know that. You don't need me to tell you. So don't let other people tell you they are. Avoid the gimmicks. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And always question the source of your information. So the front is marketing. I want to sell you this product. The back, where it says facts, is the facts. They can't lie to you there. So that's where you need to get your information as far as food goes. And that is all I have for you. Does anyone have any questions?
I had a question about net carbs.
Okay.
Because that stuff's starting to get really confusing for me to keep track of.
Okay.
If you're reading the label, it says that, oh, it only has 2 net carbs. You're looking back, it has about 14 carbs mixed with some sugar alcohols based on how many grams of sugar it has. We're supposed to subtract that with the amount of carbs and whatnot, and it gives you a net carb amount.
Right.
They also push that heavily down your throat as well.
Yeah, so here's the thing about carbs. The total carbs is the number of carbohydrate grams in the product. Now, theoretically, certain carbs are either absorbed much more slowly or not absorbed at all. So I have heard people say that they subtract the fiber out and to give them net carbs. If it's a whole grain product, I might be okay with that. If it's not a whole grain product and someone manipulated the grain and then put loose fiber in, I don't know that I would agree that your body will absorb this part of the carb more slowly. Do you see what I'm saying? I feel like it's been manipulated. So they're usually pulling out the carbs that they think won't be absorbed, which most sugar alcohols are not absorbed. So you really can pull them out, but they shouldn't be under the carb anyway. Excuse me. It's usually the fiber, and it depends on the product. At the end of the day, if you talk to our diabetes educators, they say a carb is a carb is a carb, right? So you really should be aware of the total carbs and how they're getting to that net carb number. If you're using insulin, I would go by total carbs. If you're not using insulin and you're carb counting, you know, it's a kind of a gray area. Does that help?
Somewhat.
There's no really good answer. There's a lot of debate over that. So, are you watching your blood sugar?
No, just
No.
because I read labels and stuff.
Yeah. So I would, in addition to look at the net carb, I'd look down at the ingredients and see why they're subtracting it. So if it's a whole grain, your body has to break that down. All the bonds, If it's an enriched flour and they add fiber back in, it's kind of a separate issue. This is a lot easier to break down than the whole grain. Even the non-fiber parts of the carb, if that makes sense.
You had a question?
Yeah, it was good to learn about Heart Check from the American Heart Association. Is the term heart healthy on the label? Is that a marketing tool, or can we trust that as?
I did not see anything on their website about heart healthy. Heart healthy in general, it's not a standard definition. There's not a standard definition for heart healthy that I am aware of. When you see heart healthy on a menu, it means low fat. That's all it means. It does not have anything to do with sodium. I know this because I look everything up, every menu item, everything, and I've actually been asked to review menus, and people will hand me a menu, it's low fat, but one entree might have 3,000 milligrams of sodium, and they want me to call it heart healthy, and I say no. So the check, the American Heart Association check, yes. If someone says heart healthy, I would question the source of that information. And always look at the nutrition label or the facts. Google it. And then you'll make the determination if it's heart healthy or not. Are you going to pick?
You go ahead.
I'm going to pick.
Are there any foods that one should avoid because they have a depressed immune system?
There are foods things that are created with molds, like certain cheeses, blue cheese, yes. Things that either cannot be thoroughly washed or cooked. So when you eat an apple, you really should wash the outside. Even if you're eating like a melon and you're cutting through, you should wash the outside because whatever you cut through, you're going to take inside. So things like alfalfa sprouts, that's always the one that pops into my head. You can't really wash them. There's too much surface area there. You can't get those clean. They tell you to avoid things like sprouts, moldy cheeses, unpasteurized milk, or foods that are normally pasteurized. So if you go apple picking and they have cider, I don't know that I would have it if it's not pasteurized. And then you need to cook foods to a certain temperature. We have handouts on that I can give you. But it's more about food safety and avoiding mold in your food.
I've noticed when I look at labels, doing this for a long time, whenever I'm looking at the sugar, or if they say low fat, or the sugar's lower, the sodium goes sky high. Where's the balance?
So they do that, you know why, because you have to make it taste good one way or the other. It's either going to be sugar, fat, or sodium, and sometimes it's all three. So the balance is, it can be very individual. If you need to watch your carbohydrate, that's going to be equally important to you as your sodium. When I counsel people, I try to encourage them to think of their sodium as a budget for the day. So you have a budget of sodium, let's say it's 1,500 milligrams for the day. How are you going to spend that? I strongly encourage you not to spend it all at once, so you want to spread it out through the day. And then what value are you getting for that sodium? So if you're going to eat something that has 500 milligrams of sodium, it should be closer to a meal than a snack.
Or a can of soup.
Right. So if you're going to be hungry in an hour, that's not a good deal. How much nutrition am I getting for my sodium? If you had to buy your nutrition with sodium, how much would you spend for that item? That might help you make your decision if you think of it that way. But the balance between those two things is going to vary based on whatever other health concerns you have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's
no one answer. There's no out. There's no one answer. You have to do most of the work. I can only help you make decisions and give you information that can help you make decisions. But at the end of the day, you have to do all of the work. You have to be educated about your food because it matters to you more than anyone else. And especially when you are immunosuppressed, you want to be as nourished and healthy as you can so you can fight off anything that comes down the pike. The rest of us might be able to go to a buffet and get away with things that you guys cannot get away with. You need to be more, it's almost like you want to be in training all the time in case something's going to come up. So it's very individual what that balance will be.
So the max sodium for a day?
So there are many numbers that we could choose.
Oh, there are?
The American Heart Association says 1,500 milligrams. The commonly given number is 2,000.
Okay.
For healthy adults, the number is 2,300, which is much lower than most of us take in. I usually try and hover around the 2,000, 2,300, unless you're very, very sensitive to sodium and you have issues with fluid. Then it is beneficial for you to go that low, but I don't know that that requires a huge lifestyle change for 90% of Americans. And some people just can't eat enough if they're cutting that much out. So I would stay around 2,000.
Thank you.
I have two questions. The first is with beans. How effectively do you get rid of the sodium in canned beans when you rinse them? And
I think not effectively. I've heard people say that. I've never, ever seen anything written that says that that's effective. The sodium is soaked into the meat of the beans. So I don't know if you can get rid of some of the outside, but I don't think it's enough to make a difference.
the second question I had was, after my transplant, I've had a lot of problems with food just doesn't taste right. There's a funny taste to things. And I was wondering if anybody else had that problem, if they found any solutions, and is it multifactorial, or does it tend to be due to one drug in particular?
Does anyone else want to speak to that? How far out are you?
3 months.
So I think that has a lot to do with it.
Good timing, and I can remember after I got my transplant, I had no taste at all. I really got to a point after a month of saying, I don't think this was worth doing. I mean, I really enjoyed food, but I finally, thought enough to say something at clinic, after a couple of months. And they said, oh, well, we'll take you off that yellow, whatever medication was, and put you back on the troches you had when you were in the hospital. They did that, and it was like night and day. So for 2 months, for lack of saying something about it, I suffered, and since then, it's worked too good. But anyway, the taste is back. If that's the case, that could be part of it. But bring it up in clinic. They know what commonly happens. They'll give you that advice depending on the medications you're on. In my case, it happened to be that lemony, whatever it was keeping the mouth clean, right? And instead just went back to the lozenge that we did in the hospital, night and day. Simple.
I know nothing about that. Anyone else?
You had at the beginning of the slide about the measurement of meat that you should have, like 6 ounces. Do you measure the meat before you cook it or after you cook it?
I think it depends on the meat.
Maybe fish.
You know what? I'm not 100% sure. I'll look that up when we're finished and tell you. But they say a deck of cards. I'm assuming that's cooked, because most people wouldn't go back into the kitchen of the restaurant and say, cut me out a piece of meat this big and then cook it. I mean, that's just the way I'm thinking, but I will look that up for you.
I would.
Good for you. Does someone?
Yeah, I have a question about fish. You mentioned cold water fish, so it's like salmon or tuna,
Mackerel.
mackerels and species of shark,
Right.
etc. that are good with the omega fats, but now there's all this coming out that there are also contaminants.
Mercury.
Mercury, iodine. How do you balance?
Well, I can tell you for pregnant women, because they're worried about mercury contamination, they will avoid fish almost completely during their pregnancy. I do know that the larger the fish, the more likely or the more harmful the contamination could be. So for the smaller fish, it's not as much of a problem, but for the big tuna, shark, because they're eating all the little fish with mercury and then they have their own mercury, it's a lot of mercury, or could be. So I would say eat smaller fish. I don't know that that's measured anywhere or that there's any good guidelines for it, to tell you the truth. I think it's a matter of personal preference, risk, benefit.
Like bluefish have the highest.
Right, because they're big.
They do nothing but eat for 24 hours.
Right, so you have to figure they're eating all the little fish that have mercury, and then they have a lot of flesh to hold the mercury. So smaller fish are better for that reason, not in general.
Anybody else? One more question or two? Go ahead. Up in the back
I
there.
have a comment about the beans we're talking about. I think you don't have to really use canned beans. You can cook beans from scratch. It's not that difficult to do it. Garbanzo beans, kidney beans, lentils the same way. Just soak it for a few hours and then you cook it. Pressure cooker if you have, that works great. So then you can put whatever spices you like. The way I like to do is just have some onions, saute them, and you like garlic and ginger, and then put these beans in there and eat with rice. They're pretty good.
And the pressure cookers are a really good idea for beans. The other thing I want to say about that is, again, if you have a can of something, see how much sodium it has, and how much are you going to eat. So if you're using beans and it's going to be put into a stew, how many portions of the stew are you making? Divide the sodium by that. That's your cost per portion. It doesn't mean you can't use them, but every ingredient you put in there that has sodium does add to the total cost of the sodium at the end. So you would really have to keep track. But the pressure cooker would probably solve all your problems. You could get them dry.
And then I have a question about, we talk about like dairy, like milk, like fat-free or milk. What do you think about almond milk? A lot of people talk about now almond milk.
I think it's a gimmick.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. I think if you look at the ingredients, there's not a whole lot of almond in the almond milk. It's just a lot of water. So you'd be better off eating the almonds. If you have problems with dairy, I would stick with soy or rice.
As far as sugars go, like in our coffee, would you rather us have raw sugar and refined sugar or honey? What would be the best?
They're all the same. As far as, so if you, let me take that back. If you have diabetes, they're all the same. If you don't, again, the less processed something is, the less likely it will be harmful in some way to you. So in the new guidelines from the American Heart Association, they have a sugar limit. They might have had it in the old one too, but they're really, refined sugar is not good for you. Now, if you have 1 cup of coffee a day and you put a teaspoon of sugar in it, that's not worth talking about. If you, like me, have like 15 cups of tea a day, then you have to start thinking about what you're going to put in it. So it's really the amount again.
And also, can bacteria travel with honey? I mean, they do heat it. They heat it somewhat to process it, but I'm not
you know what? I'll have to look into that for you. There's something tickling in the back of my head about that, but I can't think of it right now.
Okay.
Is somebody else?
I just kind of get overwhelmed with all this when I get to the store.
Right.
And, they're just looking at carbs, there's looking at sugar, there's looking at saturated fats, and after a while, it's like I just buy some. I don't mean that I give up totally, but I'm trying to figure out what is the most important thing to look for if I'm not going to look over the whole thing.
That's a good point, and that's what happens when I don't follow my own scripts, because I think I wanted to make a point about that. It is overwhelming. Even for somebody who does it all the time, it's, some people want to live their life very orderly and keep track of everything and do everything right, and the rest of us are just trying to get by. So I would pick the 1 or 2 things that are the most important. So, for example, if you have any kind of blood sugar issues, that has to be one of your things, right? Then if you pick if you pick low sodium, I always try and tell people pick sodium and carbs, because if you pick those things, you're going to end up with less processed food, which will give you less saturated fat. It sort of gets everything under that umbrella. But you should figure out 1 or 2 things that are really important to you and focus on that. A lot of times it will eliminate all the bad food anyway. And if you get the Fujicate app, it really, I can't tell you how awesome I think this thing is. And it gives you a grade. So you could look at something and in the supermarket, and it will tell you this is really bad or this is okay. And you can feel better about some of the choices that you make.
Lois, one last question?
Yeah, I had a question about half and half or regular milk or skim milk. Which would be best to use in coffee? Say just 2 tablespoons.
Whatever you like the best.
Because you're not using a whole lot.
Right. So all things being equal, less saturated fat is better, which means the skim milk.
Okay.
But if you have 1 cup of coffee a day, I want you to enjoy it.
Okay.
Unless it's like the 400 calorie whatever that you get at the cafe.
It's just 1 cup in my chili.
And you're putting a teaspoon, just put the half in. I'm sure that's not the official sanctioned way to go, but that's where your common sense comes in.
Okay.
Don't mess with
And
my
there's
coffee.
somebody.
Yeah, I would agree about the Fujicate. I haven't used it recently, but back in not 19, 2013, I actually just went back on the app, and it still has my history of the things that I had checked. And from that, you can make your own list for grocery shopping. So you don't have to, you figure out, okay, one day maybe you're just going to concentrate on which cereals am I going to figure out what I'm going to eat. And then you check the barcodes, and it will grade it. And so you've taken care of that one aspect. And use that always as your guide. Maybe 2 or 3 cereals that rate up in B or A. So it makes it easier because you can just go to that and get a list of what you're going to eat. And it does make it less complicated.
You're making a really good point, too. And I tell people this all the time. You can't change everything at once because it doesn't work and you're going to be miserable. So even if you change nothing, keep track of what you're doing and then look at it with a critical eye. Use the app, use a website. There's a million apps out there, and I believe Fujicate, you can log your own food in there, and it will give you the nutrition breakdown. So if you do nothing else, go do that for a couple days, and then review it. Where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses? Am I getting too much sodium? Am I getting too much saturated fat? And then laser into the things that are causing the problem. That's the biggest reason I don't like to give people, here is your cardiac diet, live long and prosper, because it doesn't suit your lifestyle. Take what you have and improve it. You don't have to change everything. You just have to improve every day or every week, get better, pick a cereal that's really good. Next week I'm going to pick I don't know, what else do we use? A soup. Next week I'm going to pick my crackers. All those things matter, and all those things are beneficial to you. It's not all or nothing. It's how can I do this better every time. That way you can be happy and I can be happy. And it is important that I be happy.
Kathie, thank you very much. Very we really appreciate it, and I hope that everybody can do just what you just said. That is, keep it simple. Find one thing to address now, and just work on that one.
That's right.
One step. I mean, where do we get? How do we get to where we are today? Right. One step at a time. I got rid of the sugared sodas. Do I still drink Diet Pepsi? You don't have to refrigerate anymore, but I still crave it at times. One thing at a time. Right? What's that? She still has Diet Soda too, but she didn't hear that. Kathie, thank you very much. We'd like to say in appreciation, 365 days a year, some inspiration to start your day. Thanks. So Trio and Second Chance, really appreciate your support.
That was my pleasure. And thank you, everyone.